Thank you all for coming. Nice to see you all. I have realised that disappointingly this is the first meetup of 26. Again, can only apologise for that, and we'll try to do better as always next year. First of all, obviously, thank you to Iru for hosting, providing teachers, beers, an array of hats, as well as stickers and the OA thing. Obviously, help yourself, no worries at all. Right, to talks tonight. So, without further ado, I'm going to go nowhere like the first one. So, cool. So, first one, perhaps make some pizza. Bit of WWDC 26 roundup. So, I'm just going to look to cover some of the high-level things that might be of interest or consequence to you folks. So, just bear that in mind. So, first things first. For those who don't know me, I'm Darren, or Daz Wallace, physician engineer at Iru, working with Apple devices for over 20 years, hence the lack of hair. I've done MSPs, consultancies, in-house IT, and now work with a vendor. So, completely the trifecta of positions, I guess. I'm also one of the organisers, one of the Apple admins. Again, those don't know. Find me on Slack and most other things at Daz_Wallace. And today, I'm here to talk to you about the aspects of WWDC 26 that might affect you and me. A few details about what I'll be covering. All this information has predominantly come from the official Apple What's New for IT at WWDC 26 document. This is all pre-release information, so subject to change, etc. And I'll have links at the bottom of each page as we go, but I also have a blog post link at the very end, which have a nice summary of all those URLs. So don't feel you have to scramble to get those written down. I'll also include a copy of the slides and the speaking notes so you can see all of the terrible things I write about myself as I'm building these decks. So, almost immediately, quick segue. How do you access this What's New for IT WWDC 26 document? If you pop the name into a search engine, this is typically the URL you're going to hit. However, at least in the UK, if you go to that URL, you get redirected to this page. Not particularly helpful. Turns out, Mr. MacMule has us covered with a blog post from 2022 describing the issue. Simply, you tweak the URL to force it to go to Canadian English if you're on the English language site, and the page should then load as expected. Please do press bug reports with Apple. Try and get that sorted. I think people have, and every time it seems to take months to get that updated. Anyway, back to the actual content. So, first of all, totally shocking absolutely everyone, we have new OS announcements. iOS 27, iPadOS 27, macOS 27, tvOS 27, visionOS 27, and watchOS 27. We also have the marketing name for macOS 27, and that's going to be Golden Gate. I actually timed that reveal, I think, perfectly. So, first up, not actually WWDC news, but related. We've got some changes to Apple Business Manager. So first of all, they've renamed it to just be Apple Business. A shame because it loses a nice acronym that we used to have and a clear way to differentiate it between sort of other things. Myself, I've taken to using Apple Biz as a nice little shorthand for it. It sucks, but it is it's better than Apple Business or just Business, which is very confusing. Apple Store Manager, just to make it even worse, is remaining as is. I don't run the marketing team there, so I would have some conversations about that. But anyway, as part of this, we've also had a unification of the Apple-rated business items under that same portal. So things like Apple Business Essentials, which was the free kind of first-party device management solution. Apple Business Connect, which is the portal to manage Apple Business profiles in Maps, Messages, Wallet, etc., as well as the actual previous Apple Business Manager. Additionally, Apple has made Apple Biz live in 200 plus countries, including a device management service in the UK. New for apps and books, or VPP for the older admins out there, app subscriptions are being added to volume purchasing. This will allow us to both purchase and manage those app subscriptions in Apple Store Manager and Apple Biz for our users. Just to note, this is going to be for app subscriptions that auto-renew, and it's not those kind of one-time in-app purchases. So there's still room for a bit more improvement there. Those subscriptions will be assigned to your users via the managed Apple accounts and not devices, so bear that in mind. And the release date for this is marked as later this year. So we've got until December, unless they delay. Sorry, I can see a reflection of the other TV and it confused me for a bit. One more thing, quite a helpful thing. Free apps managed through the Apps and Books program will no longer require you to buy licenses for deployment. So another change coming later this year, and any free app you then go to add to your setup to deploy through your managed device solution won't need to have those licenses for. It's a very small thing, but actually it's a very time-consuming thing because it's a free app. You're like, what's the point? Last slide on the Apple Business Apple Store Manager related items. There's going to be new device information available via the API. Namely, you've got MAC addresses for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, EID, IMEI, and MEID numbers are going to be available. And also, if the device is a replacement device, you're going to know about that. You're also going to know the serial number of the original and the replacement, as well as the timestamp when that was replaced. It's a really cool sort of Apple internal only information you're going to be able to see. Helpful for some. Also related to that, if folks aren't aware of it, Neil Martin, Sound Mac guy, has a Terraform project to easily interact with Apple Store Manager, Apple Biz, and his APIs that might be of interest. I'll pop a link to that in the blog post. Now, more device-specific updates. So Apple have added a whole bunch of new networking configurations as a declarative asset for I've mixed up my notes. Too bad saying hi to Dan. So Apple have added a whole bunch of new configurations for networking to declarations delivered through DDN. Those are going to include VPN configurations, DNS proxy settings, and network relay configurations. Another related big change on that side is you're going to be able to provide credentials as a declarative asset for authentication in these services. Meaning you're not going to have to bundle it into each individual profile and instead can just reference it from these other configurations. I'm not entirely clear yet, but my hope would be you get a similar thing for like certificate authentications. So if you're using Radius, 2.1x, that kind of stuff on Wi-Fi and Ethernet, maybe you should have a single certificate profile. Couldn't see any information around that, but that'd be my hope on that one. This is one we've had a heads up for a little while now, but with the release of the various OS 27s, those devices are going to enforce stricter TLS requirements. Why should you care? This change is going to affect a number of things relating to managing those devices. Device management commands, automatic device enrollment, profile and app installation, software updates, those sort of things. Services that are providing these features are going to have to support TLS 1.2 at minimum and use cipher suites and certificates that meet new app transport security requirements. Yes, I just read that sentence rather than memorize it. Apple have a support page covering that. Again, I'll have a link to that as well. I've actually got a page there if you're that bored. Essentially, this is going to impact you if you're using, say, older versions of on-prem device management solutions, or perhaps if you've kind of rolled your own device management solution or software deployment solutions. Definitely something that's worth checking because that's going to be an immediate block to any devices that get upgraded to 27. Wrapping legacy profiles. This one took me a while to kind of unpick, and to be honest, I'm still not 100% confident I understand the full feature set we're being given with this. But basically, on devices running the various OS 27s, you're going to be able to deliver legacy profiles through the DDM system. What does that mean? Well, Apple is specifying a legacy profile as one that contains payloads that are not declarative configurations. So from what I understand from that, it's kind of things that basically aren't in DDM already, your kind of standard profiles you'll be delivering. It feels like this features to allow admins, MDM vendors, and Apple themselves to bridge that transition from the current non-DDM profile configs to your DDM replacements at some point. Status reporting. So we now have some new status information that the device management service can subscribe to from the device. These are going to include what kind of enrollment the device has, supervised device enrollment, user enrollment. If the device is at the setup assistant awaiting configuration, Obviously, right now, your managed device solution has to keep holding that device, figure out when it's out of that setup. This way, the device can tell the server, the service, hey, I'm now left out. If the device is configured for return to service as well as if it's configured with a shared iPad kind of mode or options, just to be clear, that shared iPad with capital S, not your one you hand around, the actual shared iPad feature. And then for iPhone and iPad, we're also going to get general health information of the hardware through this channel. Things like whether it's not working properly, whether things are actually genuine parts. That validation can happen as a subscription service to listen out for those changes. Great if the user decides to kind of get a shady repair shop to fix an iOS device to avoid having to tell IT they've broken it. We're also going to gain the option to know when a device has been put into lockdown mode. Not going to be able to turn it on and off, but at least you'll be told by the MDS that that's an option. And lastly, this one's been quite a cool one, but you can remotely trigger log collection for Apple Care support cases on devices. So instead of talking to the user and having to put codes in, click buttons, you can just push it out to the device and it can then send it back to that. That's not something that as a managed device service you can intercept and collect yourself, but maybe it's a feature to request in the future to help out with troubleshooting. As for the actual return to service or RTS option, we've got a few new abilities. The first is we can enforce an automatic retry if that device fails to re-enroll once that erase command goes out. Great if you've got things like healthcare or hospitality where you've got these devices in position and you're using a non-technical person, say the housekeeping staff or the turnover staff, to reset or trigger these resets. You're not going to be concerned they don't come back up. You can just know that it's going to keep retrying until it's successful. You can also push out configuration to set the language and region on these RTS devices. Great if you're outside the US and or in a non-English speaking location. Users on devices themselves will be able to trigger a return to service action. So rather than it coming directly from the managed device service, user can go into Control Center and trigger it. The device will phone home first to confirm the device management settings, configurations, etc., before it triggers the erase in the RTS. That's a cool feature, just have people do it on device rather than have to go to something else to trigger it. So last thing on RTS. So you can now include a software update enforcement during enrollment of RTS devices. You don't have to manually go around to make sure they want a particular version you need when they reset. You can use the same 403 method that you currently do for non-RTS devices to push back and say, hey, I need an update to do X, Y, and Z before enrollment. The device should then completely carry out the process automatically with no hands-on at all, and then proceed to the enrollment. Cool. Another one I feel I do need to highlight, and that's legacy methods, techniques for managing software updates are being removed for the 27-line OS release. So according to documentation, this includes software update commands, software update queries, recommended cadence settings, as well as the software update restrictions such as deferrals or the background security update options. Going forward, anything relating to software update needs to be delivered from your device management service and using declarative device management. So just bear that in mind if you like to keep your Macs there. Cool. Have to manually move forward. Oh, and that's gone too far. Sorry. Okay, right. Santa killer maybe. So macOS 27, we're going to get some new configuration options. That's going to utilize the endpoint security framework to give you better controls for managing which binaries are allowed to run. These can be binaries with an application bundle, standalone binaries. And it's going to show you a message to your end users when you do block these things. There's going to be options that automatically allow any application deployed as managed. And if you, presumably accidentally, add the binary to both an allow and a block list, it's going to default to blocked. Block is going to override the line. You can manage or populate these lists using a variety of matching criteria, such as team ID and the signing ID of those signing certificates, the path of the binary, the hash of the binary, and a CD hash, which I had to look up. It's a hash of the binaries binary sign code directory. Those features do sound very similar to an awesome open source tool previously maintained by Google, so maybe a potential valid option for that. Related, Apple have also announced the deprecation of the current con.apple.applicationaccess.new profile to manage application blocking. Maybe not a great choice to put .new in that naming convention, but it's now .old, I guess. This one got people both excited and concerned depending which part of it they read. So, call this one consent prompts to rule them all. With the next round of OS releases, we're going to have the ability to group an application's privacy preferences policy control prompts into a single message to your end user, with management supplied defaults answers to those options. This is going to allow the user to one-click accept those required or requested PPC options. And if the user selects the not now option, they'll see the usual pair action, pair option prompts appear as before. As a result, the current profile-based PPC options are deprecated as of OS 27. One thing worth mentioning as well, this new option is delivered by the user channel instead of the device channel, apparently. This may cause issues if your device management service doesn't support user channel, but it may also cause issues if your users aren't set as the MDM capable user for their device. That's going to affect both vendors and admins as well. Little update as of a few days ago. Apparently, with Beta 5, Apple have made some changes to allow the current PPC system to operate as it does currently, but with the option for the user to disable the accessibility approval if they wish. Users don't have to be an admin to turn it off and on, but they're going to have the ability to turn it off even if you enforce it with OS 27. Apple have also added a similar PPC style support, including the grouping, for managing those same sort of prompts you get for various web pages. So if you have a particular domains for, say, using Google Meet, or such as camera and microphone, you can preload some settings in a one-click option for your users for specific domains. Time to ring the bell. macOS 26 is the last OS with full Intel support. Apple have committed to 3 years of security updates for those Intel devices. But don't forget, we've had a year of that already. OS 26 has been out a year. So that N-2 kind of support releases that Apple provide, 2 years' time, no more OS for Intel. No more apps, no more updates, no more patches, no more nothing. It's really time to work to get rid of those Intel devices from your fleets. I know it's always a fun conversation, but the benefits of switching to ARM on a more of a carrot side rather than a stick side is definitely worth it. Obviously, now you've got to convince higher ups to agree with you. For Apple Silicon devices, you may have noticed already, running 26.04 or newer, your users are going to start seeing the messages about Rosetta being deprecated whenever they launch an Intel-only app or an app that has Intel-only components. So they're getting heads up. Moving forward with macOS 27, Rosetta is still going to be kept as a general purpose compatibility tool, but obviously won't work with your Intel-only apps. Except for, and Apple call this out specifically, older, unmaintained gaming titles. Apple have their priorities, I guess. Someone really loves an old game that they can't get ported over. I'd love to know details on what those are, just out of interest, but go ahead. Platform SSO continues onwards. A new OS means new platform A new OS means new platform SSO features. And Apple launching some really cool options, including web-based authentication to IDPs, allowing the use of more phishing-resistant and modern authentication mechanisms. Passkey support, anyone? They're going to work at the login window, the lock screen, and firewall. So you're going to be doing platform SSO against web-based authentication with firewall screen. That means it's going to support various different multi-step and multi-factor flows from your IDPs, as well as the use of like a QR code to scan to authenticate a user. You're also, separate from this, going to be able to force the use of Touch ID or Apple Watch Unlock as the additional factor during macOS authentication. That's to provide you with phishing-resistant, biometric, multi-factor authentication without having to have added infrastructure or anything like that. Promise you we'll need that. Secured shared devices. We'll talk about platform SSO and authentication. There's some updates relating to that for shared devices. macOS 27, we are going to have the ability for users to log into a guest account created on demand by authenticating to the IDP at the firewall screen. Could this be the removal of the need for Active Directory binding for using Mac devices in things like labs and other shared usage? Maybe. It's going to allow you, though, to have your devices fully encrypted to whatever people like the standard wants it, as well as still allow that shared device usage that you may need. We're also going to have authenticated guest mode from the shared iPad for those people that are using that feature. That's allowing users to authenticate with a managed app account and have a temporary session created on the iPad without you as an admin needing to specify things like user storage quotas. Not just that, the real benefit is it's going to provide SSO for any installed apps on the device that support it. So guest user logs in the managed app ID, it's going to try to set up SSO for any apps that support on that device. So you're thinking things like Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, that kind of stuff. You potentially have a guest account so you have to log into those. Pretty cool. Right, almost done, I swear. There's a whirlwind tour of all the things that are coming out. Two key takeaways if you ignored everything else, which I don't blame you. Verify all your tools that for device management are going to use new TLS requirements. And whatever solution you're using for software update configuration enforcement, confirm DDM before you upgrade. So next slide is going to have the blog post link, copy the slides on that blog, as well as a link to the recording once that goes live, and a full list of those URLs. As any further resources go, I'd suggest listening to a recent Mac Admin podcast episode, and specifically episode 472, where they go into even more detail on these new things. And always, there's Mac Admin Slack. If you're not already in the beta channel, but you've signed up for the Apple betas, hop into the Apple Seed public channel, and that'll give you details about how you can potentially access the private channel, have more frank and open conversation around this beta. That's it, enough from me. There's a link. So real big apologies on that one. Any quick questions? If not, come and find me. All ones is not here, so there's no weird and wonderful questions. Sweet. Cheers. Quick minute or two break, and then we'll switch to the next person. Thank you.
Right, this is a bit of a history of me. So, from my time as an IT doctor, so it's just something that I feel made it a bit easier to get things done. So, I'll start off with a bit of my history. So, I would imagine a lot of people here probably start off similar, but I started off at Apple. So, I started off with something called a concierge in the retail store, which is now completely out quite a long time ago. We used to wear orange shirts and were referred to in my store in letters as dirty shirts. So, yeah, they weren't very loved by the rest of the team. I did various roles, progressed up to genius, and then I was even lucky enough to on the Apple SR18, about 5 months down here, and then shortly after that. So it was obviously something really good at keeping me in there. But one thing working at Apple made me realise that people don't really care about technology. So, you know, I get quite excited, particularly with like new operating system releases, features or whatever, but other people don't really care about that unless it's probably something like new emoji or Snapchat filter involved in that or something like that. So it's really quite good in making you realise that, you know, you might get obsessed with it, but no one else, you know, the average person doesn't really care. They just want to do that to be able to do their job. I then left Apple and went to Formula E, which I found was a real divide on if people have heard of it. Some people have no idea. So if you've heard of Formula One, it's like that but with electric cars. So I started off as kind of like the only IT person. And the guy who started Formula E, someone called Alejandro Agag, he has a habit of starting up new companies, and they're usually electrically themed. So he, at the time when I joined, started Extreme E, which is now called Extreme H, so he moved to hydrogen movement. So Extreme is actually quite cool. So if you've seen the Warthog in Halo, it's actually a similar looking car, but more enclosed. It also had a habit of tipping over as you drove it, so it was quite similar in that way. He then also, about a year and a half in, started something called E1 series, which you wouldn't know from the title, but it's technically I think it's called a foil, but it's almost like then just got a Star Wars pod racing type thing, but it's basically on water. So it's electric boat racing really. That's actually doing quite well at the minute. So and it seems to be getting quite a lot of viewers. But as I said, Formula E I started off on my own. And when I joined, everything was quite disjointed on its own. But it was where it really kind of got the feel of, what people find quite annoying as they use technology. I also found, some people like Google Workspace, they use 365. So there's always a constant kind of competition between technologies there. So it was good for that. I then moved off to a company called the Bolognini Group, which I'll be really surprised if anyone's heard of this, but it's a hedge fund. I think they hire a lot on LinkedIn, I'll say that. But so their claim to fame is that they're one of the first companies to use what was then called machine learning trading, like share trading. Now it would be called AI, I think. And they've gone big on AI. Quite weird. They actually hated the AI when I joined because they really protected their IP. So they wouldn't let anything go. By the time I left, it was just like AI was everywhere. So that was similar to a lot of other companies. And it's quite good going there because they're based in California. And they, compared to Formula E, they were probably a bit more established, describing how kind of quite slow moving they were compared to Formula E. Yeah, so that's right. I'm now coming from SiteRx. So this is like a healthcare company, to summarize it. So basically, you have a clinical trial platform, you have not customers, but like people who are signing up who would like to sign up for clinical trials, and healthcare providers who are looking for people to take part, and it kind of matches them to that service. So I've had quite a few jobs, I feel. But key thing is kind of my approach. So one thing I've done, particularly since Formula E, is instead of kind of thinking about how technology fits into things, think about more how people use it. So always start from someone sitting at their desk and how they're going to use the technology, rather than just thinking, let's get Slack, let's get Google Workspace and what have you, and do it from that. What are people actually using technology for? So that even to me goes down to things like user interfaces. So an example that I've seen is with Jira, which other ticketing systems are available. But one thing I've seen happen where basically anyone can fill in any field on Jira. One of those fields is the priority field. So, and the priority field went to higher, highest, would trigger off all sorts of alerts and what have you. But anyone could fill in a ticket and make it the highest priority. And the manager would always kind of moan that ticket, was getting submitted to highest and say that people couldn't do that. But the problem is, everyone considers their own ticket highest priority or high priority. And I always sort of used to say, I wouldn't go to the passport office and sort of say my ticket is highest and go direct to the person. You've got to kind of take that ability to customize that away and sort of hide it. So things like literally, to me, imagining yourself sitting down at a table and seeing how someone would click and somehow use your system, that kind of goes up to me. Another kind of theory behind it, I don't know how to nudge theory. So, I mean, in a way, it's probably a bit overboard for what is day to day, but there was, I think it was called the Behavioural Insights Unit when it was part of the government. But about 2010, when David Cameron got in, they set up this Behavioural Insights Unit, and it's actually got a bit of a kind of some people hate it because they see it as kind of manipulating the population, like the conspiracy theorist type thing. But one example they always give is with HMRC. So they found, I think, if you would text people before they were supposed to submit their tax return, they found that there were 30% less late tax submissions. So the whole thing is that by doing that text, I don't know exactly how much a text service costs, I call it £1 million, but actually the lost revenue would be 10, 20, 30 times that. By doing that small nudge, you reduce that kind of effort down. So it's things there, as I say, like by removing the ability to change their priority field, you're kind of nudging people to not do that. It's also even, so I use Jira because that's the only system I've ever used, but I wouldn't say I love it either. But if on your kind of support page, people always have a certain issue, you would always want to put that that request at the top of the list or that software. So, you know, where I'm at the minute, StarterX, I think we've got probably 50 different pieces of software. So if you just put all those pieces of software in one list and just ordered it alphabetically, and if it was Zoom, the problem, someone's going to go on Zoom, or they'll just pick anything. So it's kind of thinking about the interface, but also nudging people to submit things how you want it. So, yeah, no, I mean, I'll admit I started in the book, but it's got that really kind of patronising tone of voice, so I never actually finished it, and I don't get a really the Wikipedia page. But it is just those kind of things. As a real world example that I really like, if you've ever gone into, say, a supermarket or John Lewis, something like that, you'll notice that as you go in the door, there's always like rubbish. I say rubbish, but things to buy in a way. And it's because if you don't have that kind of stuff there, all you do is, let's say it's a supermarket, you run to the back and get the milk, and that's it. Whereas what that stuff is designed to do is you come in and you want to plug into it, so it stops your, you know, stops your kind of flow, makes you look up, and then you start looking at, oh, there's an offer on it's dead there. So supermarkets in particular are very good for nudges, like the whole, you know, the ones they want you to buy at eye level, the rubbish ones down below. So it's almost like thinking about reality. But also the practical side of things. So Formula E was a very odd company. So I don't know if you know, but they have races now in Japan. They did have it in Korea, India at one point, all sorts over the world. So the communication methods weren't exactly consistent. But one thing I was trying to do was to get people to use Slack. And you've also got it. Everyone will always try and DM you. And that, oh, they'll ask you the question. So I've seen people get quite frustrated at that, but I do get it because you run into loads of issues. But I think the thought process that a lot of people have when they do that is they sort of, oh, I don't want to submit it because it's stupid. They're trying to be helpful, but actually they're not. But it's a lot for you to manage. But that's why at Formula E, I kind of need it as, okay, we need to make it so that when people submit a ticket, it's almost like effortless for them. So I would definitely recommend the Jira. There might be other similar things for Slack. So the really handy thing with that is you can just tag things with emojis. So someone might ask you a question, but you can use like a ticket emoji, which is the default, to then have it created in Jira. And at the time, it didn't do two-way syncing, but it now also syncs your comments back and forth. You could also have emojis to assign it to certain people. So I think I did like needed style one last job at Formula E, but you should do anyone to have different workflows. And this is improving all the time, so it's quite useful. As well, another big thing that I would really recommend, I mean, I've seen sort of similar things, like I know there's promoting, but the support I found really useful. And to me, it goes to that kind of nudge thing. One thing I don't really like is this kind of, I know sometimes it needs to be done if you're really heavy into compliance, but forcing people to do things like I'm going to restart your computer and update, so I kind of want it to, it needs to. And everywhere, the big thing for me was restarting your computer. So many issues come in, and you have the computer's been on for 300 days, and all it needs to restart. But people loads of tabs up and all sorts of rubbish. And I didn't really want to kind of force them to do that every 7 or 8 days. So one thing I did was with the support. Say I did it. It's open source, and I didn't build it. Is you can have it alert. And the really handy thing is that kind of last boot. And this is really customizable and it's got even better. But about 8 days in, I would have it come up and say you maximum for 8 days. And that, it's surprising how much that can reduce the amount of people just get their Mac on empty or didn't bother to restart first of all. It was also quite nice, because then when they did have it on for 200 days, they'd click on it and see it. And then kind of realize actually it would be quite handy to do it. Because overall, it's not, I don't believe anyway, it's obvious to find that out. I think system information was the only way to find that out, or terminal. Which person who just uses Google Docs is going to go onto terminal and realize what their time is. So this tool is really useful. You can customize it so it's like Slack and opens a particular channel or whatever else. So it uses like the deep link URLs in that, and it's really good. I definitely recommend it. The like branding of like the underlining thing and stuff like that. You can also use the Swift UI icons in it as well, and change the menu bar icon. Have your own company brand at the top there. It's really quick and easy to do. It's going to think with a config profile. The other thing as well, like I'm quite big with sort of education, not like in a sense of sit down in class and do desk thing, but like in terms of just little kind of bite-sized tips to kind of get people using things better. So usually I found in a lot of organizations, an intranet seen as HR's job, and I actually kind of distance themselves from it, where it's actually incredibly useful. From like my degree was in marketing, I hate marketing, I did it for short, for like a really short time. However, one thing it taught me is, you know, I've seen other people where they'll do an essay of like, I don't know, you need to update your Mac, and it's a mile long, and the actual juice is like down the bottom. People would only read the subject, probably, and maybe the first few lines. I analyze it like people go, you've not answered this question back. So, you know, as an example for me, in email, I quite often put as much as possible in the subject, but make it as short as possible. But as well with things now, like, so Slack canvas are quite useful. So formulary is an example. We have a channel with Helpdesk, and you could ask a question, or you can have Slack have it show the canvas by default. So when someone comes on, I think you can have it show up every time, or if there's an update. So you could have it as like, if there's a downtime, when someone clicks on that help channel, like, I don't know, I can't send an email, but you've already put a message saying Google Workspace is completely down, like AWS has gone down, so Google Workspace is not working. So it's really handy to have IT use that kind of communication. The other screenshot is for Confluence. So again, unfortunately, I'm really heavily into Atlassian. Again, I won't say I love it, I just use it because that's what I use by default. But it has some good company code, which is basically an intranet. And it's actually really easy to kind of customize. And don't get me wrong, it does make work for IT, but it is really useful to just put those short bits. And not just like we're launching a new video conferencing system. What I found really useful was to just put out things like so booking a meeting room using Outlook Scheduler. That was like a complete mystery to a lot of people, and it's kind of surprising. That's what they say. But a lot of people wouldn't know how to look at the meeting schedules for rooms. So I actually used there's the next page. So a formula using ScreenCloud, I really recommend it because I found it really useful. There are other kind of digital signage tools. So we're quite lucky at Formula E to have TVs all around the office, and they'll play, you know, different videos, whatever. And I just use Keynote to do it, but I would literally have a screen recording in Keynote with a bit of, you know, graphics and stuff. And it would have, this is how you book a meeting room. We use something called Ignite for document storage, so Dropbox, different batch. You know, this is how you save a file on Ignite, this is how you do X, Y, Z. And the videos probably no more than 30 seconds. But because the TVs were all around the office, people would sit at their desk all day. These videos would be on loop. Probably get bored from it, so they'll try and start to loop. But that information just goes in. And for me, it kind of comes down to like whole TikTok generation type of thing. Like, you know, if you're doing an essay, there's an instruction. So this is how you do code an app from beginning to end. No one's going to read that. But if you can like go it down to these bite-sized chunks and just have it where people pass by, I was surprised at how many people go, oh, I didn't know that's how you did, you know, X, Y, Z, because I did this video. And like Keynote's really good because I don't know if you know, you can export the movie or move file from Keynote. So really easy to do. The animations look quite good. And people aren't really aware of the parameters. So yeah, I'd recommend Keynote. And then my next thing is just questions. Question. No? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. One thing that I've always struggled with is, you know, you said the example of the sense, I've always struggled with taking that level of information, so things change. How have you dealt with that over the years? Something companies where you're like, I'm an IT person, but I'm not necessarily a communications person. Come across any interesting ways to deal with that, where the data changes, but there's nobody kind of managing that, so you end this old stale organization.
This will probably depend on your organisation. So, like I said, formulary, I had an incredible free reign on things. Like it makes it sound really boastful, but I think it was just because my management based in Spain at formulary. So I think it was quite happy to sort of just leave me to manage things. So I did things like renewals for software, all the way down to pulling things out, digging things. So formulary, there was an old article, I would just go on and be like, that's going. Don't get me wrong, if it was something that was precious to like HR, I would go and ask them to, it's 6 months old now, can we get rid of it? But at other companies, so like volume was quite bigger and had a lot more kind of, this is my responsibility and, no one else can touch it. That's a bit different. So it is going to depend on your organisation. One thing I've sort of found though is a lot of the time I'm quite heavy on Slack and asking questions and doing stuff in. Other people aren't. But quite often I ask a question and get ignored, and it's not because people are ignoring you, it's because they don't really know the answer. And sometimes it is that it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And if it's plausible, if someone says, if it's an article on, I don't know, set up your benefits for 2026 and it's now 2027, that's, there's no point asking, just get it gone, it's that date. So that's what I would say. Have confidence in your decision, but equally you might be in an organisation that doesn't have confidence in your decision.
I really like the idea of the TikTok style videos for something. This will be the nice way of doing it. Videos on something, just get a quick so even if it's some grasping up questions, it might be that video might be looking for a ticket into ask a question, but people learn something. So that's a really nice way to do it.
Yeah, it's really surprising, and I'm not a Photoshop expert at all. I mean, the whole AI images sort of made it relevant now. So I really like Pixelmator Pro, and I sort of know how to do basics. Or if not, like they have loads of templates in Pixelmator Pro, and I know how to edit them, so it sort of looks like I've done it. So stuff like that, you can sort of, fake it no. And also, I think sometimes I look at I could never do that. It would look really rubbish otherwise, but actually the bar is a lot lower than you think. So that's kind of what I get.
What's the name of that silence tool you mentioned?
Screen Cloud.
Screen Cloud.
Screen Cloud, yeah. I've used, there's a few I've used, and Screen Cloud always seems to be the best. And like they have their own ARM-based thing that plugs into the back of the TV. Really good. And actually, formerly used to use them for signage races and all sorts. So I really recommend it. Cool. Anything else? No?
Cool. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Thank you for everyone turning up. I was a bit worried it was going to be light on numbers today, but needn't worry. So, yeah, I put this talk together and gave the title of it long before I'd come up with any content for it. Then went on holiday, then came back into review season hell. So nearly finished the slides. So hopefully it'll be reasonably sort of more of a learnings-based thing about what we've been through at Iwoca and how AI has affected our wonderful lives. Hopefully it will dovetail in with some of the sort of user-focused pieces. I tend not to present on incredibly technical subjects. I think we have more than enough of those in this sort of forum. So I like to pick sort of a little bit management level or maybe conceptual thinking. So, but it does open the floor to a much more sort of discussion-based presentation. So if you've got anything you want to ask as we're going through, stick your hand up. I'll try and repeat the question. Otherwise, I'll ignore you and we'll see how we go. So who am I? I'm James. I've been around here for a while and down in the corner. I have been at Iwoca now for about 7 years. Interestingly, I actually got a job at Iwoca after presenting at one of these meetings. So if anyone else wanted that push, stand up here and make a presentation. There can be financial reward in doing so. That journey at iwoca has taken me from essentially the only IT guy in there at 90 people. We are now at a little bit over 800. So it's been a journey, I can tell you. I'm no longer on my own, thank God. So yes, yes, specialty, as said there, able to wear shorts for 11.89 months of the year. I'm in fact, tonight I am specifically dressed in holiday denial clothing. If I continue to dress as if I was still on holiday, I believe I'm still on holiday. So, as I went through this, everyone being a developer, I mean, it's quite a statement, right? But it's kind of a little bit true in the direction that AI has taken us. And it will depend on the kind of company you're at. You know, the more increasingly technical style company, you're going to be running into bigger problems than I have. You know, if you've got a less technical company, then things might run a bit smoother, or you might be able to sort of influence a little bit more control on your environment. All depends. I mean, we've got probably some quite large companies in here, some quite small companies. The Mac fleet at iwoca is about 350 out of those 800, but I do have to deal with all 4 platforms. So your mileage might vary. So I kind of split it down into these 3 areas that I'm going to run through in the presentation. Kind of stems from our IT mantra at iwoca is to protect and empower. So it's like, those are the 2 things that we always have in mind whenever we're doing any kind of project on the IT side. So, and then I thought, well, let's throw it in for what you guys, if you've not really grasped the nettle, how can you think about AI in your role as well? So, what have we got in at iwoca at the moment? So you can have a bit of context on sort of where we are at the moment. We do all our inference, i.e. the LLM models are from Bedrock, and we are tied to EU availability zones. Basically, this is a security and privacy thing. We do financial operations. It's the least bad way we can do it, we think. We guard all access with AWS, various SSO services tied into that. So we're not got any sort of long-standing API keys laying around the place for people to access those services. We use Claude Code, Claude Desktop. Primarily, that's come out of our sort of the CTO wanting to use Claude models. We have a hosted environment, which has come from our analytics sort of stack, which is essentially it's a terminal first environment that's tied to some of our back-end analytics stuff. We've also then co-opted to AI enable that. So that's quite nice, but it is a terminal only environment. We use NAN for sort of work automation, so non-technical stuff, sort of line of business stuff, which is in our company was the biggest challenge. You know, the technical teams have been able to sort of run away with their AI success, but bringing the rest of the business, as we'll get onto, was probably a bit of a bigger lift for us. And then we also have our own internal tooling called iwoca Chat, which, as you might expect, is a sort of an inbuilt home sort of brewed chat interface for sort of operational staff that has all of the MCP connections and everything built in so that they can get hold of any information, and we will building that into our sort of customer database, our financials, you know, Snowflake exposure and stuff like that. So that's kind of where we've got to as an organization with AI so far. And I would say most of that's from a standing start in February, when the CTO stood up at the town hall and said, here's our new credit card app that I've vibe coded in 4 hours. So what the hell are the rest of you doing? Yeah, there started our journey. Our bad analogy slide. You are in the little boat. AI-powered boat, and you are heading towards a security nightmare of everyone suddenly getting hold of AI if you don't control it. Before AI, you know, it was pretty much a known danger in managing your Mac fleet. As we've sort of gone into AI, things have got a little bit bottom heavy. It's the shit you can't see that you've got to start worrying about. And what I mean by that is basically, you know, above the waterline, the visible stuff, that's the kind of the bread and butter that everyone will have been managing and working on in their fleets. Essentially, your patch management, your standardized sort of patch management. And then hopefully sort of browser extensions, the next biggest sort of exposure risk for most people, I would say. Something that probably could do with a talk all of its own, but there we go. So now with the increase of AI, we've got a massive increase in the attack service by AI delivered tools. If you're asked in Claude Code to build you a solution, if you're not careful, it will just willy-nilly go out to the internet and decide what you would best use, right? Horror stories from the trenches. We've had lots of alarms go off a couple of months ago because someone in finance, their laptop suddenly started pulling down repos which were to do with cryptocurrency. And it turns out that they were sort of single-shotting a new financial model, and it didn't quite go to plan. I mean, it's a learning experience for everyone, right? IDE extensions as well. This is something that traditionally a lot of Mac fleets aren't particularly hot on controlling, but it is a very big risk factor, and it's something that people will have to start thinking. And yeah, Vibes is also, it's just full of fun. All of that is kind of being driven at the moment on the sort of security side by supply chain attacks. And from my perspective and what we'll talk about here, the supply chain attacks, why we worry about that is that essentially the end point of developers or AI-enabled people is probably the biggest target. It's like cyber criminality at the moment. And the reason for that is rapid and often unchecked software, you know, high-value API keys, AI privilege, and then there's more than one story out there of once a laptop is compromised by supply chain, that it's actually sort of the AI accounts that are being used, and how quickly do you think someone could run up a £10,000 bill against your inference provider before any alarm started ringing? So supply chain, what we're talking about is all of those sort of command line packages, development tools, which the your helpful AI assistant may have installed for you to help you complete what you've asked it to do. Those themselves upstream get compromised. The development accounts, bad code is put into them, and then all of a sudden that's running with sort of root privileges on your Mac, and the game is afoot. One problem we've run into, traditional sort of endpoint tooling is not really designed with AI development in mind. Software inventory side of things kind of does stop in most instances at what's in the applications folder. You know, what's your known sort of software stack on the machine. And also it has been sort of difficult to provide curated packages. It is possible on command line tools, you know, having pipe repos, but again, it's not something that your average Mac admin has been thinking about until probably the problem that suddenly occurred to them. So get out ahead of this if you can. So what to do about it? There is new tooling coming to the market. It's something I've had to spend a lot of time researching, and something that I've recently just deployed on the fleet is by a company Aikido, and it's called what is called SafeChain. Now, this isn't an advertisement for Aikido. They have a very good commercial product, and that product is specifically designed to protect developer-style workflows on Mac laptops. It's great, but what they do have is an open source the core engine of that product, which you can download and install to your fleet and configure. I mean, don't get me wrong, you've got to do the heavy lifting here. But what that will do is will provide shim into those online repository packages, and then we'll sort of step in the middle and compare it to their real-time threat intelligence feed. And then you can back that up with additional sort of policies, or don't install a new version of this PyPy package if it's less than 7 days old. So it's really quite a neat sort of cooling off opportunity. So by that time, you can't, don't get me wrong, you either want to be up to date or not, but you want to find that sweet spot in the middle, whereby if something is compromised, it gets found out, gets revoked before it hits your laptops. So it's a great tool and well worth looking into. Have a look at Aikido for the other products that they do. Like I say, their threat intelligence feed is very good if it's the sort of thing that you need to be looking into these days. The other thing that's often overlooked in trying to secure your AI fleet, so to speak, is the actual tooling provided by the agent harnesses, both for desktop, for code and codecs. In my view, they've got some of the most configurable sort of preference sets of any pieces of software that you're likely to be deploying at the moment. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword that it takes a while to get your deployment right, and also the speed at the moment is quite something. The other thing to do, have a look at deploying your own sort of AI marketplace. So that's where your plugins and tool sets and skills will be offered to the AI harness, and you can have your own created sort of garden of tool sets. Definitely something I would recommend. And it also allows you to sort of cross-pollinate your skills from various teams that way as well. Another thing to look at would be OS Query to get increased telemetry on what's happening on the fleet. And our friends at Workbrew would also be a good recommendation. If you're not providing sort of developer style sort of workflows via something like Workbrew to give you the visibility of what's happening at scale in your fleet, have a look at it. There is a free version of Workbrew that gives you that insight and visibility. Definitely worth looking at. So, shifting gears slightly onto the empowerment side. Any sort of things that I've learned, I suppose. Yeah. It's not just a single tool. When sort of we had a real push for, oh my God, the board and the founders saying that everyone needs to be doing AI, it was quite technically driven, and to a lot of people, AI looked like Claude Code and nothing else. Which is quite funny because the previous year, everyone just wanted ChatGPT, chat interface, but all of a sudden, it's no longer that. It's a terminal tool, and now we've got internal agents, various harnesses. You know, it's a multifaceted thing, and I suppose you could extend that out into your SaaS estate as well. That you start thinking about from an AI governance perspective. Not particularly core to what we're talking about today, but AI is everywhere. Don't let the most technical teams dominate the conversation. One thing I had to really work and fight for was actually configuring and deploying for desktop co-work, as it's called. Because the main sponsors of AI were developers, they could not see why anyone would be confused by a terminal interface 24/7. And I really had to go against one of the co-founders. But I had since been proven to have delivered some value on that one, so that's all good. AI, yeah, magnifies everything good and bad. And I've said here mistakes happen at speed, but when we were, for instance, enabling our Slack environment to be hooked into our iwoca chat, we really had to sit there and think about, well, what permissions and tool sets are we allowing to happen? So, and then we had to work out what happens if the AI writes a message on behalf of you. It gets quite meta, that one. So we ended up with a nice little footer that gets appended if the message has actually been posted by AI, which is quite nice. Apart from when one of the co-founders sends you a message to do something on Saturday by AI, and then you fight fire with fire, and you tell him I'll get it done on Monday, sent by AI. It was, yeah. I'd had a few beers before I did that, but yeah, those mistakes, they don't just happen at speed; they happen at machine speed. So that's why you've really got to think about it. So even if they're not malicious intent, accidents happen a hell of a lot quicker. So you need to get people up to speed on what their responsibilities are in thinking about things. And training and drop-in sessions, it's not just a technical exercise. You really have to engage and bring people along. As on the Helpdesk chat that was happening earlier, what might appear very obvious to a lot of people, there will be a massive amount of your audience that potentially just do not get it. We've had great success. We have every Friday morning an AI enablement drop-in. You know, people can come in, just ask questions, submit questions ahead of time, and it's been a great hit for us because everybody and their dog just wants to come and ask you, how do I build, you know, a dashboard, right? And then you go, well, yeah, you can't. Well, where do we go next? Once you've got it out there, I suppose the biggest thing is that you are never, I mean, we all know that technology moves, but AI is moving at such a pace at the moment. You need to keep iterating. Even if it's like full desktop at the moment, about every 6 days a new version comes out, and there's a bunch full of preference keys that have been added in that week, right? Literally, and everyone wants it, you know, snappy. The important bit, and it kind of comes back to everyone wants a dashboard, you've got to get it off the laptop, right? AI in and of itself, the development teams doing their using AI to help them on their software development is fine and dandy. But when someone's got a nice sort of piece of PR work that happens every week and pulls in a load of sources, makes you know, sense of what's going on in the market, does a little summary and puts it out on board communications, but it only runs if their laptop's open, that's no bloody good to anybody, is it? So you really need to help them with sort of orchestration or automation platform and getting those tied into the ability to hook into your inference. We use N8N, but any of the others just need to get that as part of your sort of business sort of package. And it is offering it as a service to the business, which is the important piece. Don't forget about the supporting tech around AI. A lot of stuff like getting Git configured on people's laptops is the forgotten step. We now have a little workflow that runs through making sure that they've got prerequisites in place and guides them through getting their personal access token for GitLab, figures GLab, command line tooling, and Git, and make sure that it puts the personal access token in the keychain and sets Git and GLAD to use the keychain rather than having environmental variables. So it's the small little details like that that really make a difference. And then provide templates for common tasks. And again, that kind of goes back to your marketplace, plugins, the MVPs, skills. Your team, how are you going to get the most out of this? Transformative time. Set yourself up for success. First one here, I love this. Fall in love with your terminal again. Now, some of us have got a few grey hairs and have been around long enough to remember when, using a Mac required a terminal. Or some of us are old enough to remember when Mac didn't have a terminal, right? There is, and I see it in my team that I employ. There's been a sort of middle generation somewhere that kind of as tooling has got better, possibly had less need to get into understanding what goes on under the hood. I think that trend is reversing, and people that want to get on going to need to reskill or upskill there. I wouldn't worry. Context is still king. Knowing what you guys know as Apple admins is, if you've ever asked AI to do something quite specific on the Mac platform, having to then explain to it that its script won't work because you want to deploy it via MDM, and that's going to go in the root environment, and then what's available to that script in the root environment and what's installed as default for Macs. That's all the context you've got to bring, right? So, sweat the details. Your knowledge is still incredibly valuable. If you don't do them, start to learn DevOps methodologies. Like I say, a lot of what is going on in the AI field on the technical side is leaning in that direction. Again, sort of goes back to the terminal skills. And a lot of it is based around basically making data available to the AI natively, rather than it being data being made available to the user. It's a really weird concept, but we've thrown out products in our documentation suites because they are, in the terms of some of our senior management, only there to make data look good for people to read. Now, it might sound a bit harsh, but that's the truth of where we are. People aren't being asked to read documentation, they're asking Claude to highlight it. And one thing I'd say is don't focus on the hardest problems to solve. Solve the bulk of your simple problems that are already there so that you can really provide the value in tough problems itself. Often my team try to get far too ambitious in what they're going to try and achieve with AI in the quarter. And I'm like, well, if you've got the shit out of the way, you could really focus on it. And I think that's often missed in the IT team. But yeah, have a think on that. What have we got? Oh, there you go. Just because you can. I find it quite funny because we've spent the last 15 years trying to figure out technical debt in technical organizations. What is the cost of building something, supporting it, maintaining it? The rise of SaaS. And now all of a sudden, it's like people have forgotten what we were trying to do in engineering organizations for the last 10 years. There are right points where you should start thinking about this buy versus build, and there are certainly wrong points to start thinking about. So, yeah, definitely those sorts of conversations would be ones you're having with your teams. And that's me. Any questions? Oh, Oh, please.
I love the idea of empowering users, something you're trying to do as well. I'll do this to highlight it. It's not enough to quiet you, kind of. Empowering people to use is great. Usually with the parent rest that looks correct, but there's something we run into where just because it works, something is right.
Yep. Agreed.
Double check what they're doing. That's definitely an issue.
Oh, and the hitting the button, yes, is like user crack. Yeah, I've had 2 or 3 internal API keys leak early on, and it's people like, just like, I want this dashboard, that connects the data from our internal tools. Oh, would you like me to set up a railway account for you to host that, sir? Of course I would. That's a really difficult problem to start to solve for. There is one piece of sort of what I would consider will become essential AI infrastructure, and that is the governance piece that will sit like an AI WAF, and it will sit between your client and your influence, and it will literally do sort of compliance and contextual checks on both directions. And then we'll do things like substitution of PI data if it's hooked into your, your CMS or whatever, or your customer database.
So what you're saying is we need to hire a person. The we've all been all forever, folks. Exactly, and an AI can check my work. Yeah, what's your it's fine.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
No worries. Cheers, guys. Thanks, mate.
Hi everyone, I'm Matteo. For those who don't know me, you're very lucky to come there. I work at Jamf. I currently work with the products team as a protection and research engineer. The talk for tonight is kind of like, it's nicely tying into what Jay was talking, because like there's all this AI going on our devices, and sometimes it's kind of a cool to like stop and actually go and have a look at what's going on onto the devices. So the talk is called Spelunking macOS telemetry. I probably chose the only word which you cannot pronounce. You're gonna have it. And when we talk about like telemetry, there's also like, why do we care about like telemetry on the devices? So I'm thinking something which is actually something that we have investigated within my team. And it's just like a case, an example that I want to use to show like some of the reasons. And this is like campaign called Flexible Care by DPRK. DPRK is the service we actually use for North Korea, and it's like something that my team started. And the tactic was kind of simple. They will trick usually like a software engineer to get in a call with them on Zoom, and then they will just go like, well, sorry, we cannot hear you. There's a problem with your microphone, your software is out today. Here's a link. Go and run this command terminal that will go and download the correct driver, or I don't know the exact word they will use, but like they will trick someone into actually getting a script run on terminal. The script will might be anything legit. We'll just go and fetch a script from a remote server. We'll create persistent items, launch agent, and then of course it won't fix your for everyone, but it won't fix your Zoom. It was gonna steal your credentials, keychain. If you have like crypto wallet, it's gonna take everything, and your Zoom will still be broken, and you will be left in an empty Zoom because threat actors, after they had your keychain, your password, your tokens, they wouldn't even say goodbye. They will just disconnect from the meeting. So this is an example. Let's have a look at like how can we make any use of telemetry on the device. So telemetry, what I like to think about it, it's kind of like a recording. It's kind of like if something will be recording your device, not just the screen, but what's actually happening on the operating system. It's not a photo, so it's not a snapshot. It's just like a continuous stream of recordings. It's very tidy. All of the telemetry events on your Mac can kind of be, this is like, you should go super deep, not really, but at a very high level, they can always go and be represented with that kind of a table that you see. So you're always going to see in your telemetry event who, which is your device, what happened, what program ran, which program, in this case was Curve, from the example, who launched that program, so like a shell and terminal, be that bash, now it's ESH because Apple doesn't like bash anymore. When, like everything is timestamped and it's allowed, yes or no. By default, telemetry is not, doing any kind of arbitration. Your device is just there to record those events. So by default, there's no blocking, there's nothing. In this case, a malicious event happened, and it's without having endpoint security software and EDR, it's just not executed. So how does telemetry look like? How do you get it? Well, it's not something that you come up with. It's built in very set of APIs for endpoint security. Was called for a very long time Apple Security Framework, ESF. Then Apple completely dropped the term without announcing it. So do not refer that to ESF in front of Apple, or they will be very, very angry. So it's built in, it's basically a string from the kernel. You get an agent, you build your own agent that can subscribe on that. And again, what you get, it's really what you see on that skeleton, kind of like. So it's a JSON, formatted file, which just kind of tells you, like, again, what happened on your device, who ran it, and the results. And you can basically take it, you can subtract the event, you can subtract, for example, the segments, so what actually was executed. So a command was executed in the shell, someone deleted an application, or there's a very long list of events. But we're not really interested in those for this section. So what we actually care is sometimes we have to build like a chain of events because the telemetry is string. It's not in a linear time form. You will have timestamp, but the timestamp usually doesn't tell you the story. For example, in this case, we're interested in the loader. So what actually was downloaded from the remote server, and not really logical, but you need to read the events the other way around. So if you want to understand where the loader is from, you have to go and look at, what was the child process. And the child process, and you're like, well, who spawned that child process? Well, shell. Well, that was being shell. And you go back to terminal. So that's how you kind of like reconstruct all of those. So, for example, and all of those, they're dictated by Apple, but they show schema of like, the parent process is the process of executable or binary, anything that launched it, and the responsible is who is actually at the very top of the tree. Something we've seen is, if you're familiar with terminal, is like everything on any macOS, any Unix or Linux will get a PID, person identifier. Now, the common mistake we've seen that like when people are looking at telemetry, it's just looking at like the process identifier and then just go and tie all that together. So process identifier 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, let's filter for that, and that's the whole story. Well, yes, but no. Yes, but also macOS recycles bits. So you have no guarantee that that process ID wasn't issued by the operating system to something completely unrelated and maybe run an hour ago. Because especially if you have, again, back to what James said, if you have developers that run a ton of AI on their device, they run clone code that goes on shells here and there, build software, compile stuff, you might end up having macOS recycling PID very, very fast. So never trust a PID, never trust something that just because, a PID, you see that, it might just be something completely unrelated. And yeah, it's like something you usually like to say, like past life signature guns. So in this case, for example, the launch agent was basically like pointing at something like called logd. Now logd, there's actually something called logd, which is like logging daemon on macOS. But if you just look at like, that thing is calling logd. So on macOS there's log D, so it's totally fine. Well, no. So how can we identify that? Is it the real log D? Well, there's a bunch of information we can look at. For example, the signing ID, which is a string that identifies the binary. So by the binary sign, you will have a signing ID. You will have what's called a platform binaries. So many executables, and I'm using the word many because all of them, or we really don't know what reason, many of the executables that are shipped with the OS, many executables which are built by Apple to be within macOS, they carry a platform binary where it's just like that says, hey, I'm a legitimate process built by Apple. Don't look at me because whatever I'm doing, I'm not of interest in your research. Most of them have it. Some don't. So sometimes you have to be like some guessing. A team ID, which is like a unique identifier, assigns to a developer. If anyone who's view is familiar with like, hey, I need to gather a team ID, or like, hey, I will publish application, you need to first go and obtain a developer account, which will then give you a signing certificate, for which you can sign. You have your own unique signing ID. CDH, where Darren disappeared, that's what he was saying in the first talk, which is the actual computed hash of the directory where the code is stored, where the actual bundle ID is stored. So if we go back to the first example of like the DPRK taking interview, if we would have had telemetry and if we would have looked at the event, we would be like, oh, look, this is doing something in 10. You'd be like, well, yes, but it's not signed by Apple, and it doesn't have a CDH that matches what we know, so that's definitely non-legit. So we would have like, this is like the classic detection that any endpoint security will just do, which is like, hey, this process is going to be like an Apple process, not signed by Apple, looking at stuff in GMP that doesn't hatch doesn't match, so that's going to block it. So all this is say what we say is like when you care about like endpoint security and everyone talks about behavioral detection. What's about behavioral detection? Well, it's basically what we do. In this example, this is like a command that we still see nowadays, where like someone who will trick a user into running this command. And in this case, like with FSSL, which basically it's applying, you can use internal, be a fast silent in the background, so it's kind of like transparent, most detection, and the measure the little vertical type that means type to bash, or it can be another shallow interpreter. That means that whatever you're downloading from this super trusted repository called whatever.sh, never trust anything directly into Bash or any other. There will be vendor that says, hey, this is our installer, just go do this. That's not verified, because by doing this, this is a cur command, so whatever it's hosted on that web server that you're pointing your cur command to, will the command runs in memory. It doesn't land on disk, so you have no visibility onto what you're actually executing. You're just downloading something and then executing whatever it is. It's all in memory. It's firing, so it's very, very hard. So this is like something. This is a. The saying is like a hill I will die on. Never ever trust someone that just say like, hey, use this cur command and that type into bash or whatever other shell to install software. Don't do that. Don't do that. Trust that you have a vendor. Shouldn't be like push them to get like a better installer, push them to get like a PKG. But like this is still as of today the most common techniques that we see for malware and for threat actors. This is incredibly common, and we do publish something which is called like 360 reports, where we basically look at every year. We're gonna like sit down for a very long time, but we sit down and we kind of like try to understand, okay, what's the previous year malware landscape look like? What are the techniques? This is still number one. This has been number one for like 3 years, and it still is.
So it's just a question.
Is there not more security around automations these days to prevent this exact kind of thing? Or is that much bigger use space?
You like you could like you can set up like for example you can say like I put on my Jamf hat here. Jamf Protect, for example, in this case, will throw a detection that will just say, well, yeah, I try to keep it like company agnostic. In this case, yes, for example, my team writes detection that looks at those kind of things and it will throw out an alert and will say like, probably shouldn't do that. And then if you as administrator or if your security team just feels like don't allow anything with, for example, another thing, if you will throw like a -K, we're in 2026, -K means ignore any TLS or security warning. So if you can have an HTTP not with TLS website, then you can just do curl, go and grab anything. Maybe not for long, because we'll see how it goes. The enforcement with Apple that Darren was talking about, it works great in browser, it doesn't currently work in terminal and other stuff. But we'll get there. You can say go and prevent this kind of thing. So you can say like, anyone is trying to run a curl command that contains -K, just kill it. You can do the same with like, and this is like a big part of what my team does. We kind of look at those techniques, and then we're like, well, no one should ever like type curl into bash, but there's so many vendors that do that. So like, we're like, if we will enable what we call prevention event that just goes and kill this, this is like millions of events per day across like Jamf customers. So we're like, well, it's bad practice, but we cannot go and kill 50% of the installers in the software industry. But yeah, that's why I'm like, you should like, if you have like any vendor that still goes like, hey, this is how you install it, just push back a bit, because like it's 2026. There's AI, there's a lot of things that people can use to make their tools better. I mean, it's good because like then this keeps it busy, but you know, that's kind of a level up. And yeah, if you don't like, another thing is like, well, you know, to see telemetry, I need a SIM, I need things that my security team doesn't allow me to access to. Apple has been very kind and built in ES Logger, which is like on macOS. So you can basically use the ES Logger built-in tool to kind of like give you a snapshot of the telemetry, and you can kind of like filter. So you can go and read the man page. There's a ton of S logs. Or if you're lazy like me, you can just grab an app for like Mac Monitor, and it will kind of like, it's an app where you can sort of see the telemetry. It will tell you like, hey, what event you want to subscribe, what event you're interested to see, and then it will display them to you in a very nice way, format them for you. It's very nice. It's built by a competitor, so I take my vendor hat off because it's just a tool from a competitor. But again, if you want to get started, like start with one event, start with one device, one process you might be interested into. Maybe in your organization, you're like, well, maybe we should kind of look at what our developers are doing with curl, especially if you have codecs, those tools which are used curl as bread and butter. They just go and download random things, make them executable locally, execute them, and you're like, we have a little bit of more visibility into what our developers are doing, what they're downloading, from where, which flags they are using. By the way, Anthropic uses C flag for their stuff. So yeah, just again, don't take it as like, hey, now tomorrow morning, go and I don't know, block any curve that does that. Also, tomorrow's Friday, so please read on Friday. No push the prod. Don't push anything.
That's much better. Ban anything. Possibly go and then go on holiday.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to get started, take one host, get Mac Monitor in it. Start with like, hey, what can I look at? I don't know, maybe curl, and then start maybe with like, I don't know, curl. What is it downloading? Is it downloading sign? Where is it downloading? It's downloading to temp directory, making executable on temp directory. Who does that? Stores do that, but So yeah, back to the topic of the talk, which is like follow the breadcrumbs, which is like every step in the trace. We've seen that there's endpoint security and the device, it just tracks everything that's going on. Yes, events are standard. It sometimes look like this huge mountain you have to climb, but the learning curve, it's not that steep. Once you kind of like get your hands dirty and kind of like understand how it feels like, it's fairly easy. Look at the identities and signatures, starting with like getting it false and like, hey, what sign binary looks like, well, sign application looks like, and then yeah, match on the behavior. Yeah, like as it's seen like a curve. We don't want to go and draw a curve on your endpoint, otherwise you will have your developer with pitchfork at your office or at your home. But yeah, kind of like try to understand what are the behaviors, what's going on within your own company. Look at telemetry data, and again, start small, take a lap there, maybe run through something that you usually do, and look at the telemetry, sit and like, okay, does it make sense? What's going on? So that's my talk, and I forgot to thank you slide. So thank you.
He'll be around.
Now you have Wojciech.
Right, hello once again. We have only 15 minutes. This talk was originally 45 minutes, so I removed most of the slides, and we have we need to leave this building in 40 minutes, as the dust said. So let's speed up a bit. So I'm Wojciech Reguła. I work for Security. I'm a security researcher. You may know me from Black Hat or other security conferences. I'm also a speaker at macOS Admin and Objective IDC. Those Apple technologies. The fact I'm here is total accident. I was last time in London 8 years ago, so it's total accident that I'm here. But thank you for the opportunity. I have over 70 CVEs registered in Apple, so I spend too much time of my life researching stuff and hunting for vulnerabilities. I also have a blog, which is wojciechreguła.blog, which is absolutely not an English-friendly name. So if you use an alias, which is called x.zip, that's my domain, which will redirect me to my So yeah, really quick introduction. So the agenda for today is that I'm gonna introduce you with the basic security mechanisms of macOS. I hope, especially in this community, I don't need to explain the basics. So I will just, go through the three main mechanisms, and then we're gonna focus on macOS Password Manager, the popular ones. And at the end, because I don't want you to leave without any recommendations and the feeling that work is burning, etc., I will give you some recommendations on how to protect your phone. So the introduction, I think that's something that I don't need to explain, but macOS is not Linux. On Linux, generally, the permissions are based on the on the ownership, right? Files of the UID of the user, etc., etc. On macOS, the situation is absolutely different, and if somebody thinks it's like in Linux, it's absolutely not. So, for example, if you have an application A and application B, and they both run with the same user, application A should not be able to control the application B, and it has like very bad consequences if you can do so. In macOS, if one application wants to be controlled by another, you must have get a permission, which is a permission which an entitlement actually which Xcode gives when you create an application in a debug, right? If somebody says, "Oh, but you're on Mac, your system is POSIX compliant," I would say, yes, it is POSIX compliant. It means that we have, for example, a ptrace, but ptrace is not fully implemented like it is in Linux, for example. So even if you have root, if you have ptrace, you should not be able to mess with the other process's memory. And what happens if you can do
influence other processes, even if they are run with the same user ID. You can, for example, insert private entitlement of this process. So you can bypass the whole privacy restriction, the whole PCC. There are some private entitlements set by Apple which would allow you elevating your privilege from user to root. There is also installer, for example, has a private entitlement which would allow you fully bypassing system integrity protection. So no, macOS is absolutely not like it is on Linux. In the original presentation, I have like 10 more slides about it. But if you're interested in seeing all the differences, go to my Maxis admin presentation from the last year. It's already on YouTube. So the basic one, system integrity protection. If this is off, like most of your security is turned off. System integrity protection makes you a rootless. You're not the cat on macOS. In the default configuration, you should not be able to modify some part of the system. You should not be able to influence other processes. Here we have an example. System integrity protection is turned on. We have root. We try to debug WWDC, and you can see the attachment has failed. Second one, we have a simple Hello World application. We try to give it a private entitlement. We sign with the private entitlement, and it gets instantly killed. And the mechanism responsible for that is Apple Mobile Firing Integrity, called also as MFIT. So here you have the logs that restricted entitlements not validated, blaming out. So the second most important one, and the third important one is hardened runtime in modern macOS versions. So if you want to see if an application is signed with the hardened runtime capability, you just use this command and you have the flag, describing that it is signed with runtime. In belonging thread, hardened runtime just makes your process uninjectable. So it blocks code injection techniques, various code injection techniques. But actually, hardened runtime may have runtime exceptions, which actually disable some of the parts of the hardened runtime. And if we hunt for vulnerabilities during pen tests or during vulnerability research, I mostly look for this one, these two actually. So it's allow build environment variables entitlement and disable library validation entitlement. If I want to see if an application has any of those, you just use code sign minus d minus entitlements. And you can see, for example, Firefox disables library validation. I reported it to Firefox like 6 years ago, I think. And they told me because they need to have a backwards compatibility with Flash. What? And we have 8 minutes left. I'm sorry, I'm trying to speed everything up, but normally I would show you 6 or 5 password managers used in different contexts, downloaded in different contexts, written in different technology, and I would be hacking each one by one. But here, let's say start from the summary. So you have the 5 one I picked for today. You may choose which you would like me to exploit.
Not LastPass.
Not
Who is using LastPass?
I don't know. You would be surprised. So which one? Decide.
Yeah,
Keeper.
Which one?
Keeper.
Keeper. This is interesting one. Yeah. So normally when you download an application from the internet, Apple requires the application to be notarized, right? And notarization enforces hardened runtime. So in general, if you download anything from the internet, any app from the internet, you should not be able to inject your dynamic library into the application because hardened runtime should be turned on by default, right? But not this time. If you download Keeper from the App Store, from the App Store, it would not have the hardened runtime set. And you know what? I thought in the beginning that's a bug on the App Store. Maybe should I, report it to Apple? Because if something doesn't have the hardened runtime turned on, I just use little insert libraries, inject my library, and in the context of the process, so I can grab all the passwords the process has. Right? It's like simple as that. So I thought maybe I should report it to Apple. But then I read the documentation, and there's an information that add hardware runtime capability, which is not necessary from App Store apps. So it means that if you download something from the internet, it is notarized, so the hardware runtime is turned on. It's mandatory. But if you download something from the App Store, it's not. So which way is more secure? That's the question to you. If apps in the App Store do not have hardware runtime mandatory, right? So, let me show you the exploit. It's like really easy. That's the absolutely most lame one. Built insert libraries. I wrote a keylogger. It's on my GitHub. It's open source. User types master password, and every keystroke is being lost. That's it. I can also make this dynamic library to dump the whole decrypted database, but with the master password, you can just go decrypt it for yourself. It's just as is that. Okay, which one? Which we have 5 minutes left. I'm sorry. Which feature manager would you like me to hack next? Which one? NordPass. All right. All right. So NordPass is directly downloaded from the internet, so it gets notarized. We have hardware runtime, etc. That's right. But it's written in Electron, and yeah, Electron should make that more. 3 years ago, I had a talk on DevCon in Las Vegas about hacking Electron applications. I created and they can exploit engine that auto-exploit Electron applications just by injection through their web dev tools, or however they call it. Like Electron apps are browsers with bundled HTML, CSS, with JavaScript code, and like it's like typical functionality in the browser that you press Command I and you have the dev tool, right? And may execute JavaScript code within the web page. And the same goes with Electron apps. So we have an injection as a feature. So it doesn't obey the isolation mechanism of macOS. So the only thing you need to do is use this command. You can see that enable node CLI insert arguments is enabled, which is the default configuration. Then you use my tool I presented at DevCon. I just set 2 more environment variables to make the exploitation easier, but you got this. It's just like injecting JavaScript code in the application. And if you can see on the market, there is a lot of password managers within Electron, and in most cases, it's as you can see, it opens WebSocket, which is the dev tool. Actually, I can inject JavaScript code, and this is a feature. So I unlock the vault. And you can see the master buffer, which is nice. I'm sorry. I have more examples, but we have 3 minutes left, so I need to go to the end of this talk. Just quick spoiler, and KeePass XC. That's like a really good written application, but if you use the browser extension, you may just spoof the connection and just grab everything that's browser because Chrome, for example, saves the private key which connects to the by WebSocket to the KeePass. It must somewhere save the private, and it saves it as a flat file. So you can just grab the private key and like impersonate the connection, talk to the KeePass XC, and just grab the database, or just ask the KeePass XC to give you the data. And that's it. That's it. Like reading vulnerability. And in LastPass, it works as a browser extension. So that's the same problem. We can instrument browser to auto unlock the LastPass and grab all the encrypted entries. That's it. Because in browsers you can use projects like Selenium, which is used by QA engineers to automate browsers to test your website. So you can do the same with the browser extension because it's just an HTML file. And if it has auto unlock vault feature, it will do some crypto, but you don't even care. You just use Selenium, let it out of the crypt, and you just grab the entries. That's it.
Is that the same for one password?
Yeah, it is.
Just like
So recommendations for you, as I promised. Verify what is being launched in your macOS fleet. Create a clear policy on where credential secrets must be stored, and make sure employees use the password managers with bless and trust. And of course, hire pen testers to check your macOS infrastructure. We do macOS security testing, so I would like to hire us. I would be happy to help you. We do like sys compliance and all the stuff, but we also configure, check configuration of profiles. I review custom scripts. I do some local privilege escalation attempts. Last time our client hired me to verify the macOS infrastructure, and actually they used Vacuum tablets in the infrastructure. And during the test, I found a 0 day that allowed me, elevate my privileges from user to root, and that was it. So good luck. That's it. Thank you very much.
One question. Mr. Ben Tom, so I have one very quick question.
Yeah.
Will you come back and do a part two?
Yeah.
So Mark, I just want to recommend checking out the Max 7 talks throughout Max 7 this year.
When is that?
What's the date? End of September, I think. Am I right?
We'll see. But if you want to meet me and talk about macOS security, I will be in Gothenburg in Mexico. And on Objective IDC in Hawaii. I don't know if I will have stock because there are still the reviews going on, and I don't know if or not. But on the Maxis admin, I will be for sure. So I would be happy to talk.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Yeah, so thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to Eric for hosting and food and drinks. Red line downstairs, out front door, turn right. It's the next door along. So literally the pub next door. I'll see you all there. Do me a massive favour. Got any rubbish, just quick grab it and chuck it in the way past. That'd be awesome. Otherwise, I'll see you in the pub. Thanks everyone.